The chandeliers sparkled above like icy constellations. In the grand ballroom of the Astoria Crown Hotel, silk gowns swept over marble, and champagne flutes clinked in orchestrated elegance. It was the kind of night that masked intentions behind velvet and glass. The kind of night where appearances mattered more than truth. Daniel Vale adjusted his cufflinks as he stepped through the arched entryway. He wore a classic black tuxedo, pressed to perfection, and on his arm was Ava, 26, blonde, and surgically breathtaking. Her mask was gold lace, matching the high slit of her designer gown. She looked like a secret he wasn't supposed to have, and that was the point. They were late, on purpose. Arriving last at the masquerade gala was always a statement, but tonight, Daniel needed to send a message. He had moved on. His marriage, the headlines, the gossip, it was all old news now. Lila had left quietly, months ago. No lawyers, no divorce. Papers, just silence. That suited him fine. Her absence had become convenient. Ava was younger, simpler. No emotional landmines. No unpredictable nights. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and like, spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. Smile, Ava whispered, leaning into his shoulder as they passed the photographers. Her breath smelled faintly of peppermint and champagne. He did. Cameras flashed. From across the room, the social elite turned to look. Old investors, political allies, gallery owners. Some offered toasts. Others offered glances laced with knowing smirks. Everyone recognized the shift. Daniel Vale, once the guarded family man, now flaunted his freedom like a tailored suit. He led Ava through the ballroom with an ease that bordered on arrogance. Behind his mask, he scanned the crowd, not for danger, but for confirmation. No Lila. No one from her side of the world. Good. Ava leaned close again. You really think she's not coming? Daniel didn't answer right away. He watched a senator's wife whisper into her husband's ear while glancing their way. She's not the type, he said, sipping his drink. She never liked these people. Ava smiled and tilted her head. Then why do you? Daniel's eyes lingered on a crystal centerpiece. He didn't respond. He never brought Lila to these events. She found them hollow. Said they turned people into mirrors, nothing but reflections of each other's ambitions. But now, those same mirrors showed him something else. Ava fit in. No awkward silences. No complicated grief. No surprises. He was done with the past. Done with apologies. A waiter passed. Daniel exchanged his empty glass for another. Ava's laughter rang out, too loud for the moment, but he let it pass. Then, the music shifted, the strings slowed. A hush fell so naturally over the crowd it felt rehearsed. Daniel turned to see why. The ballroom doors opened again. For a second, the light from the hall flooded in, blinding, washing everything in gold. Silhouetted in the frame stood a woman. She moved with slow, deliberate steps. No mask, just a dark emerald gown that shimmered like wet leaves under moonlight. Her hair, black, cascading over one shoulder. Her eyes, unmistakable. Lila, she hadn't changed. But something about her presence had. On her arm was a man no one in the room could place. Tall, gray-suited, with a calm stillness that made the air seem thinner. Daniel's jaw clenched. He didn't realize he'd crushed the stem of his champagne glass until it snapped, slashing his thumb. He didn't feel it. Ava looked up at him, confused. Daniel? Who is that? But he already knew. His wife had just walked in, and she wasn't alone. She glided across the ballroom like she belonged to it. Lila Vale didn't need a mask. Her presence was its own disguise, serene, unreadable, and cutting through the luxury. Air like smoke through crystal. Her gown clung like memory, dark green satin with a plunging back, low enough to make the bold stare and the insecure whisper. Daniel couldn't move. Julian Hart walked beside her, one hand resting lightly at the small of her back. He was older than Daniel, but only slightly. Silver at the temples, polished and composed, like a man who didn't need introductions, because people already feared they should know who he was. The whispers erupted like a second orchestra. That's Lila Vale, the ex-wife. Wait, are they divorced? Who's the man with her? Is that Julian Hart? Daniel's hand throbbed. Blood trickled along the jagged edge of the broken champagne stem, now resting silently on the floor. He hadn't even noticed. Letting go of it, Daniel. Ava's voice was sharp now, pulling him back. You're bleeding. He waved her off, eyes fixed on Lila, but she hadn't looked at him once. Instead, she offered Julian her hand. He lifted it to his lips and kissed the air above her skin, an old gesture, too refined to be modern, too intimate to be meaningless. Daniel's stomach flipped. She smiled. Softly, strategically. What is this? Lila turned then, and her eyes, cold as blown glass, met Daniel's across the ballroom. Not long enough to be mistaken for longing. Just enough to say I see you. And I don't care. Ava grabbed a napkin, wrapping his hand quickly. She's your wife. Daniel didn't answer. She's stunning, Ava muttered. And who's the guy? Daniel's eyes hadn't left Julian. He owns 3 shipping conglomerates. And half of Malta. Ava blinked. He's that Julian. Hart. Daniel gave a stiff nod, jaw locked. He doesn't show up to charity balls. He funds them. The lights dimmed as the orchestra resumed, and the first waltz began. Lila and Julian stepped into the center without hesitation. The crowd opened like water around them. They danced with effortless elegance. The room had hundreds of people in it, but somehow they moved like they were alone, like they'd been rehearsing this moment long before tonight. And then Lila laughed. Not a big laugh, just a soft curl of her lips, head tilted back slightly. But it echoed in Daniel's ears like a dare that he couldn't breathe. He didn't recognize this version of her. The woman he'd married would never have walked into this world with such poise, never allowed herself to be this exposed, which meant this wasn't just an entrance. It was a performance. That it was war. Why is she here? Ava asked, voice quieter now. Daniel, if she left, why come back like this? Daniel didn't have an answer, but his heartbeat told him one thing clearly. Lila hadn't returned by accident. She never left, not in the way he thought. The lights flared again as the waltz ended. Guests clapped politely. Lila bowed her head to Julian, and he leaned in to whisper something. Her expression changed. For a fraction of a second, her eyes flickered to Daniel. Just a flick, and then she turned away, hand on Julian's chest. Smiling. Daniel's blood ran cold, not because he was jealous, but because he had the creeping sense that she knew something dangerous, something already set in motion. Daniel didn't sleep that night. Back in his penthouse, the skyline blinked with indifferent light, but his eyes refused to close. The ballroom still echoed in his mind. Lila's bare back, Julian's polished hands, the way she didn't flinch when their eyes met. Ava lay next to him, her breathing steady. She had no idea what she'd stepped into. He sat up quietly and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, resting one palm on the glass. Rain tapped against it in soft, rhythmic fingers. Lila never used to like rain. It made her restless. 4 years earlier, the loft was silent, except for the hum of the dryer and the soft thud of a book closing. Lila sat on the couch, her knees tucked to her chest, fingers wrapped tightly around a mug she hadn't sipped in hours. I made an appointment, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Daniel didn't look up from his phone. With who? A therapist. That got his attention. His eyes lifted. Cold. Impatient. For what? He asked. Lila stared into her untouched tea. For us. Daniel exhaled through his nose. Lila, we're fine. People go through things. We lost a child, she said sharply. We don't talk. You haven't touched me in weeks. I cry. In the shower so I don't scare you. Does any of that sound fine? He stood, walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge just to close it again. The silence stretched between them like a thin wire, one wrong word away from snapping. I just think dragging some stranger into our business makes it worse, he muttered. No, she said. What's worse is pretending it never happened. Daniel didn't respond. That he never did. In the months that followed, the house grew colder. They still hosted dinner parties, still smiled in front of clients and friends. But the bedroom became a dead space, sterile, wordless. She filled journals. He filled bank accounts. She asked for presents. He gave her gifts that he was always calculating, always managing. Even grief had a budget. When she finally stopped asking for therapy, he was relieved. When she stopped talking altogether, he was comfortable. And when she left, quietly, with just a note and a box of memories shoved into his closet, he barely blinked. That it wasn't until months later, when Ava laughed at one of his tired jokes, that he realized how simple things could be with the right kind of woman. Ava didn't question, didn't prod, didn't bleed emotion all over the walls. She didn't remind him of the baby they lost or the marriage they'd buried beside it. But tonight had shifted something. Seeing Lila in control, elegant, untouchable, it had disrupted the image he'd crafted. For the first time, he felt like the one being observed, studied, played. Had she always been capable of that, or had he made her this way? Back at the window, Daniel pressed his forehead to the glass. The city was so alive, millions of stories behind those lights. His had once been one of them. And now, he was the one being written about. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. He walked over, picked it up. A text. No name. Just a number he didn't recognize. You built your house on silence. Now it's your turn to listen. He froze. The message disappeared seconds later. Ava stirred behind him. Everything okay? She mumbled. Daniel looked out the window again. The rain hadn't stopped. Daniel hadn't expected to see them again so soon. The art gala was smaller, private, invitation only. A quiet event for quiet people with loud money. It was the kind of evening where no one raised their voice. But war still happened in every glance that he hadn't brought Ava this time. Claimed it was a work thing. In truth, he didn't want her near Lila again. Not until he understood what game was being played. And Lila was there. Of course she was. She stood beneath a marble arch, sipping wine as if the last 10 years hadn't shaped her into something entirely new. Julian stood beside her, hands folded, neatly behind his back, posture perfectly relaxed, as if nothing in the world could possibly surprise him. Daniel kept a calculated distance, but his eyes rarely left them. Julian wasn't just wealthy, he was poised. A man who didn't need to dominate a room to own it. His movements were unhurried, his expressions faint but deliberate. And the way he looked at Lila, calm, measured, respectful, made something inside Daniel twist with a feeling he refused to name. When the soft music began and couples drifted to the floor, Julian extended a hand to Lila. She didn't hesitate. They moved like wind across glass. Elegant, unforced. Daniel watched, jaw locked, glass in hand. His fingertips tightened around the stem. Then Julian leaned in. He whispered something to Lila. She didn't laugh, didn't react. But her gaze shifted, subtly, toward Daniel. Daniel froze. Whatever was said, it had been meant for him. He tried to play it off, turning his attention to a nearby exhibit. But his chest felt heavy, and the stem of the glass dug into his palm. Who is this guy? The whisper came from behind. Ava. He hadn't noticed her enter. Her hand slid along his arm, warm and unaware. I thought you said it was just a client dinner, she said. Then I see you here, watching them like a ghost. Daniel didn't answer. Ava looked toward the dance floor. Is that her again? With the same guy? Daniel didn't move. Ava's voice dropped. He gives me the creeps. Daniel's hand twitched. He's harmless. A lie. A bad one. Because in that moment, Julian turned toward them and smiled. Not broadly. Not warmly. A small, calculated curve of the mouth. Just enough to let Daniel know. I see you too. The music ended. Couples clapped politely. Lila and Julian bowed slightly to each other and moved off the floor. Daniel turned to leave, but Julian was already approaching. Mr. Vale, Julian said smoothly, voice rich but soft. Pleasure to run into you again. Daniel forced a smile. Likewise. Julian's gaze flicked to Ava. And this must be not important, Daniel cut in. You two seem busy. Julian chuckled. We are, but never too busy to greet the past. His eyes lingered on Daniel's bandaged hand from the broken glass at the ball. Be careful, Daniel, he said gently. Some things break too easily. Daniel didn't speak. Julian nodded politely and walked away. Lila followed without a word. Ava watched them leave. What did he mean by that? Daniel didn't answer. He stared down at his hand, throbbing beneath the bandage, then back at the exit where Julian had disappeared. Something cold settled behind his ribs. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't rivalry. This was strategy. The next morning, Daniel woke to silence. Ava had left early, leaving a note on the counter in her looping, half-formed handwriting. Jim, then brunch with Kayla. Don't overthink last night. You looked shaken. We'll talk later. He crumpled it. He hadn't told her about the way Julian smiled before walking away, or the chill he felt crawl up his spine when Lila met his eyes. Not with sorrow, but something colder. Like she knew exactly where to apply pressure and was doing so, 1 inch at a time. His phone buzzed. He reached for it instinctively, assuming it was Ava. But it wasn't no contact name. No profile picture. Just a number he didn't recognize. The text sat stark and still. You took everything. Now watch what it feels like. He stared at it. For a moment, his mind tried to rationalize. An investor. A troll. A misfire. But no, the timing was too perfect. Too personal. His thumb hovered over the screen. He hit reply. Who is this? Message failed. Sender disabled that he tried to trace the number. Dead end. Burner. The message deleted itself after 60 seconds. Daniel stood in his kitchen, barefoot on polished stone, and suddenly felt exposed. The air seemed too still. The apartment, too quiet. Later that evening, he and Ava arrived at a fundraising event for a literacy foundation, one Lila had co-founded years ago. She'd stepped away after the miscarriage. Daniel never asked if that was grief or guilt. They entered through the garden terrace, where soft jazz floated through strings of white lights. Guests mingled with wine glasses and measured laughter. Daniel scanned the room, that he found her instantly. Lila stood near the central fountain in a navy dress that shimmered like ink. She laughed, actually laughed, and clutched Julian's arm, as if she hadn't a care in the world. Her posture was light, free, elegant, untouchable. Ava leaned into him. She's really thriving, she said carefully. Daniel forced a tight smile. She always liked this place. Lila hadn't even noticed them yet, or maybe she had that Daniel's phone buzzed again that he stiffened. Ava looked up. Something wrong. He opened the message. She doesn't cry in showers anymore. His stomach dropped that he scanned the room. No. One was looking. No phone pointed at him. No glances from behind wine glasses. Ava peered over. Who sent that? He clicked his screen off. Wrong number. But she didn't buy it. He felt her pull back slightly. Then Lila turned. Her eyes skimmed the crowd with effortless grace until they landed on him. She smiled. Not the smile from their wedding album. Not the one she used when hosting clients or decorating a nursery that never got used. This smile was triumphant, like she'd already won something. Julian leaned in to whisper something in her ear. Her eyes remained on Daniel as she nodded slowly, then turned away. Daniel's jaw clenched. Ava noticed. What's happening between you two? He didn't answer. Couldn't. Instead, he grabbed a glass of champagne and downed it in one long swallow. Ava stepped back, watching him. Watching them. Daniel's grip tightened again, and this time, he didn't even notice the glass shatter in his hand. The bathroom door slammed shut behind him. Daniel stood at the marble sink, gripping the edge so hard his knuckles turned white. Blood from his shattered glass had soaked through the cloth napkin wrapped hastily around his palm. But he didn't care. Not about the blood. Not about the sting. All he could see was her, Lila, smiling, dancing, breathing like the last 5 years hadn't existed. A knock came. Daniel. Ava's voice echoed from the hallway, sharp and strained. Open the door. He didn't. A second knock. Louder. I swear to God. Daniel. He yanked the door open. Ava stepped in, her heels clicking furiously on the marble. Her eyes were wide, glassy, chest rising too quickly. Want to tell me what the hell is going on? She asked. Not now. No. Now. Right now. I've had cameras flash in my face for 2 weeks. Whispers everywhere. And tonight, I watch your wife twirl around with a billionaire while you stand there shaking like a child. She's not my wife. Ava laughed bitterly. Really? Then why do you still bleed every time she smiles at someone else? Daniel stepped back. This isn't about her. No, she snapped. Then what is it about, Daniel? Because I thought I was your future. But lately I feel like a prop in some twisted production about your past. He turned away. Ava followed. Tell me something. Did you ever love her? He didn't answer. She blinked. Jesus. I did, he said finally. At one point. Before or after you started controlling every part of her life. Ava's voice dropped, lower now. Because I know, Daniel. About the breakdown. His blood froze. She stepped closer. 2 years ago. The clinic in Vermont. You had her admitted. Voluntarily, you claimed. But I know better. Who told you that? Does it matter? She said. You sealed the records. Had your lawyers. Shut everyone out. The press never even knew. You kept her locked in that mountain retreat while you started building a new life with me. Daniel's voice was quiet. She wasn't well. No, Ava whispered. She was grieving. She stopped eating. She wouldn't get out of bed. She screamed at shadows, Ava. She lost a child, Daniel. Your child. He turned sharply. And I was supposed to do what? Let her destroy herself while I watched. You drugged her into silence. The words landed like glass breaking across his face. He moved toward her, quickly. You don't know what you're talking about. Then explain it to me, she snapped. Explain why someone would bury their wife in a retreat and show up with me 2 weeks later like nothing happened. He grabbed her wrist. Let go of me, she hissed. His grip tightened. I said, someone cleared their throat. Daniel turned. A staff member stood in the doorway, an older man in a black vest and white gloves, holding a silver tray. I'm sorry, the man stammered. I was bringing towels. I didn't mean to interrupt. Daniel stepped back immediately. Ava pulled her arm away, cradling it. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. The man nodded awkwardly and stepped out. The door slowly clicked shut behind him. Silence. Daniel turned to Ava. You can't say anything. Her voice was flat. Because you'll ruin me? No, he said. Because it'll ruin you. Ava's eyes narrowed. Now I understand why Lila left. She didn't break. You broke her. Daniel said nothing. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. You're afraid. That's what all this is. Not about love or guilt. You're just terrified of being exposed. He didn't argue, because she was right. And somewhere beyond that thick ballroom wall, Lila was dancing, smiling, waiting. The ballroom pulsed gently with music, but the mood had shifted. Subtle, slow, like air being sucked from a sealed room. Daniel stood near the back wall, watching Lila dance with someone he didn't recognize. She moved fluidly, as if the confrontation with Ava hadn't happened just 10 minutes prior. As if the walls weren't closing in, Ava was gone. Disappeared after the argument. He hadn't seen her since the staffer caught them in the hallway. His phone remained in his pocket, silent. That worried him more than 1,000 texts would have. He turned to leave, to look for her, when a ripple moved through the crowd, subtle at first, shoulders tightening. Whispers skimming the air. Then someone called for security. Daniel followed the movement, guests parting like drifting smoke, toward the terrace doors. Out near the garden, under the soft string lights and trimmed hedges, a man lay slumped over a marble bench, still wearing his mask. His phone had dropped beside him, screen cracked. The server leaned over, checking for a pulse. Security arrived a moment later, 2 suited men with radios and polite urgency. They crouched beside the man, exchanged hushed words. The man stirred, groaned, then passed out again. Daniel didn't recognize him, but something about the shape of the mask, the tilt of the man's jaw, one of the security guards picked up. The phone. The cracked screen flickered on. Daniel caught a glimpse of the image. A hallway. Marble walls. A man grabbing a woman's wrist. Him. Ava. The photo was grainy, but unmistakable. The guard's brow furrowed. He turned the screen toward his partner. They both stood. One looked directly at Daniel. Daniel took a step back. Before he could speak, a quiet voice floated down from above. Trouble? Daniel turned his head. Julian Hart stood on the balcony overhead, leaning slightly against the railing, sipping something dark from a lowball glass. He didn't appear alarmed. He didn't even seem curious, just present. Watching, the guard walked over. Mr. Vale, would you mind stepping inside with us for a moment? Daniel hesitated. What is this? Just a quick check. There's been an incident. We're reviewing footage and speaking with guests. Discreetly, Julian sipped. Of course. Discretion is everything, isn't it? Daniel stared at him, jaw tense. Another voice interrupted. She's gone. It was the event coordinator. Nervous, breathless. Everyone turned. Mrs. Vale, she clarified. She left through the west corridor. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't check out. Just walked out. Daniel's chest tightened. She had known this was coming. Julian chuckled softly, then addressed no one in particular. Masks can only hide things so long. The staffer gave a nervous laugh. The theme of the night, I suppose. Daniel said. Nothing, but he let the security guards lead him into a side room, a quiet space with tall curtains and too many mirrors. They closed the door gently. Behind the glass, the party continued. Music, movement, and the illusion of control. But something had shifted. The game wasn't being played anymore. It was unfolding. The lounge smelled of aged leather and ambition. Daniel sat alone at the far end of a long, mahogany table, hands resting on the cool surface, the weight of everything pressing down on his shoulders. The security guards had left without explanation. No charges. No accusations. Just a message. Mr. Hart would like a word. Now the room was silent, except for the low hum of the old brass chandelier overhead and the faint clink of ice in a crystal decanter across from him. Julian Hart entered quietly. No entourage. No fanfare. He closed the door behind him and poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking. Then, slowly, he took the seat across from Daniel and slid a glass forward. "Scotch," he said simply. "A rare one. Only a dozen bottles exist." Daniel didn't touch it. Julian smiled, not unkindly. "I thought you might need something smoother than champagne tonight." Daniel said nothing. Julian took a sip and leaned back. "Let's skip the performances. I don't deal in dramatics." "Then what do you deal in?" Daniel asked coldly. Julian's eyes flicked up. "Calm. Unflinching. Control. A beat passed. You're playing a dangerous game," Daniel said. Julian's smile widened. "No, Daniel. You were playing a game. I'm simply offering you the rules." Daniel's jaw tensed. "What do you want?" "I'm here to offer you a deal," Julian said, folding his hands. "Clean. Simple. Mutually beneficial." Daniel laughed bitterly. "This should be good. You'll announce a formal, public divorce from Lila," Julian began, voice even. "You'll give a prepared statement. One that admits to emotional misconduct. Not illegal. Just morally unpleasant." "Why the hell would I?" "You'll take the blame," Julian continued, undeterred. "The media loves a scandal. But they forgive fast if it comes gift-wrapped. You'll look like a man trying to be better. The public eats that up." Daniel's voice dropped. "And what do I get?" Julian reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek folder. He slid it across the table. Daniel opened it. Bank transfers. Preliminary contracts. A signed offer of investment. 8 figures. Julian's company would acquire a 49% stake in Vale Innovations. Enough to save it from collapse. Enough to shut down all pending lawsuits. Enough to breathe again. Daniel blinked. "Why would you do this?" Julian leaned forward. "Because I'm going to marry Lila." Silence. "Is this some kind of power play?" Daniel whispered. Julian studied him for a long moment. "It's not about power. It's about restoration. Lila deserves her name back. Her dignity. Her own story, without your fingerprints all over it." Daniel stared at him. "You don't know her." Julian's tone darkened. "I know what. She survived. I've read every file. Every sealed record. I know what you buried, what you medicated, what you covered up with flowers and silence." Daniel's throat tightened. "You used her grief as a leash," Julian said quietly. "I'm here to cut it." Daniel looked down at the offer again. It was everything he needed, and everything he never imagined losing. "If I refuse?" he asked. Julian stood, buttoning his jacket. "Then I'll drag you through the public square. One headline at a time. One deposition at a time. Until there's nothing left of your name but ash." He walked toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and your little girlfriend?" he said without turning around. "She's already halfway out the door. People like Ava don't stay with sinking ships. They sell their story first." Then he was gone. Daniel sat there, motionless, the glass of whiskey still untouched. IT dropped at 8:06 a.m. on a Thursday. No warning. No press leak. No smear campaign. Just a single upload titled, "What Power Looks Like Behind Closed Doors." Anonymous. Black thumbnail. No tags. No clickbait. And yet within the hour, it was everywhere. Splashed across news outlets. Whispered through boardrooms. Trending on every platform that could hold a scandal. Daniel Vale's face appeared first. Not from a red carpet or Forbes feature, but grainy. Footage from inside his own home. Phone video. Hidden camera. Muffled audio. "Lila, stop crying. It doesn't work on me anymore." His voice, cold. Familiar. Real. The image shifted. Lila in a bathrobe, sitting cross-legged on the floor near the bedroom door, hands shaking. She said nothing. The only sound was her breathing. Daniel again. "If you won't take the medication, I'll call Dr. Hartley. He'll do it himself." "You don't want that, do you?" It kept going. 37 minutes of stitched-together footage. Months' worth. Lila begging for space. Daniel threatening her with psychiatric holds. Quiet exchanges with Ava, who appeared hesitant, looking off camera during several interactions. Point one clip cut, like a knife. "Ava. She's not a danger to herself. You're overreacting. Daniel. She's a liability. She can't even function." The Final seconds showed Lila in a hospital gown, looking out a window, unaware the camera caught her. Then, fade to black. Daniel watched it unfold from his office. Security blinds shut, TV muted, phone buzzing nonstop. He didn't know who uploaded it, but he knew who built it. Lila had been recording everything. Every fight, every manipulation. Quietly, methodically. Probably for years she'd never screamed, never thrown things. She'd just waited, built, preserved, and released it when the world was watching. His assistant burst in without knocking. "Sir, NASDAQ just froze your stock. Vail Innovations dropped 42% in under 2 hours." Daniel said nothing. "Board's requesting an emergency call. Investors are demanding statements. We can't hold them off." "Still, nothing." She hesitated. "Do you want me to prepare something?" Daniel blinked slowly. "It's already prepared." He dismissed her with a nod, then opened his drawer. Inside sat Julian's offer. The folder hadn't moved since the night he walked away from that lounge. His finger hovered over the contract. Control, that's what Julian had said. That's what Daniel had always held on to. And now, control was bleeding out of him. At noon, a follow-up post went live. Truth in her voice. This time it was audio. "Lila, calm, measured." A voice memo, likely sent to a lawyer or trusted contact. "He told me grief made me irrational. But grief is honest. Grief doesn't manipulate. He made me invisible, then punished me for disappearing. The world devoured it. Podcasts dissected it. Celebrities quoted it. By sundown, Vail Innovations was being investigated for internal harassment claims. 3 former assistants had come forward. Ava was unreachable. Her apartment emptied. Her social media accounts wiped. Someone leaked a photo of her boarding a flight alone. The caption read, "Maybe she was a pawn. Or maybe she escaped." Daniel stared at the screen until it blurred. He stood, walked to the window. Below, the city still pulsed. Unbothered, indifferent, and somewhere inside that city, Lila had just flipped the last card on the table. The courthouse smelled like dust and disinfectant. Daniel sat alone on the defense bench, his tie loosened, his hair a shade too unruly. Gone was the curated suit, the confidence, the strategist's poise. What remained was a man unraveling beneath the fluorescent lights of justice. Cameras weren't allowed inside the courtroom, but they lined the streets outside, hungry, relentless. He hadn't seen the sun in 2 days. He didn't ask for bail, didn't have to. Julian's lawyers had made sure of that. Ava entered quietly, escorted by 2 officers and a plainclothes detective. She wore no makeup. Her blouse looked borrowed. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the printed statement. She never looked at Daniel. The judge asked if she was ready. Ava nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." She cleared her throat, eyes scanning the courtroom. Not for the cameras, not for sympathy, just for steadiness. "I was in a relationship with Mr. Vail for over a year. I did not know the full extent of his past until recently. But on the night of the gala, he grabbed me. Hard. He wouldn't let go." Her voice cracked. He was angry. Unpredictable. "I told him to stop, and he didn't. I felt afraid. Not for the first time." The judge nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Ms. Monroe." Daniel stared straight ahead. He didn't flinch. Not when Ava spoke. Not when the bailiff read the formal charges. Not even when the prosecutor requested a temporary restraining order. But inside, something fractured, because he knew what this meant. It was over. Not the charges. He could fight those. But the mask, the illusion, the empire of perception he'd built, that was gone. What had started as a personal war had spilled into boardrooms, courtrooms, headlines. And now, into the one place he couldn't control, Ava's trembling hands. When court recessed, Daniel was led through a side corridor to avoid press access. That's when he saw him. Julian, standing near the vending machine. Calm, polished. No tie. Just a linen blazer and the posture of a man who never had to force respect. They didn't speak. Julian didn't need to. He nodded once, slow, deliberate. A gesture not of arrogance, but closure. Daniel stopped walking. The officers urged him forward. He didn't resist, but he looked back. Julian had already turned away. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Ava as she stepped into a waiting car. She didn't speak to them, didn't wave. She just slid into the back seat and pulled the door shut behind her. The headlines would come within the hour. Ava Monroe speaks out. Daniel Vail, from tech titan to defendant. Where is Lila? That last one played over and over again, because Lila hadn't shown no statements. No press conferences. No interviews. Just silence. She hadn't attended court. Hadn't reached out to Ava. Not even to Julian. Not publicly, at least. She had simply vanished. And somehow, that said more than anything she could have screamed. Back in the holding room, Daniel sat on a metal bench, staring at the gray wall. He heard the latch click behind him, but didn't turn. A guard dropped a plain brown envelope in front of him. For your attorney, the guard said. Or your conscience. Daniel waited until the door shut again before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed. Centered. You silenced me for years. Now I let the world speak instead. LV. He folded the note slowly, hands shaking. For the first time in weeks, he felt the weight of everything. Not just loss, but consequence. The ocean didn't roar. It breathed. Soft waves rolled and curled against the jagged cliffside like they knew how close the house was to slipping off the edge. The estate sat perched atop the stone, ancient and glassy, all sharp lines and quiet wealth. Lila walked barefoot across the grass, the damp earth pressing cool and real beneath her feet. The breeze caught her hair and whipped it across her face. But she didn't push it away. She welcomed it. Let it sting. She had felt so much worse. Behind her, through the tall glass doors, a television played on mute. The headline looped beneath the anchor's face like a slow heartbeat. YEC CEO Daniel Vale sentenced to 18 months in domestic abuse case. The anchor's mouth moved. Images flashed. Court sketches. Ava's tearful walk down courthouse steps. Daniel being led in cuffs through a back exit. No one cheered. No one jeered. The world simply watched and then moved on. Lila didn't. She stood at the edge of the cliff, arms wrapped around her torso, not from cold, but from something quieter, something deeper. A wound that no longer bled but hadn't yet scarred. Does it feel like closure? Julian's voice came softly from behind her. She didn't turn. He stepped closer, stopping just beside her. His shoes sank into the grass, the tailored hem of his pants brushing the dew. He didn't touch her. He never did unless invited. I wouldn't know what closure feels like, she said finally, voice almost lost in the wind. They stood in silence. Together, watching the sea that a sailboat in the distance drifted lazily under a wide sky. I didn't do this to destroy him, she murmured. Julian tilted his head. You didn't have to. She closed her eyes. I just wanted the truth to exist, she said. Not twisted in a headline or hidden in a sealed record. Just seen. Julian nodded. And now it is. She looked down at her hands, still, pale, open. He tried to erase me, she said quietly. He almost did. Julian didn't speak. He simply waited. Lila turned toward the house. Inside, her life was beginning again. Furniture she picked. Staff she trusted. No shadows in corners. No pills disguised as protection. No silence sold as love. She had rebuilt everything. Not loudly, not with vengeance, but with care. That was her revenge, not the headlines, not the sentence. This, peace. Julian watched her. You never said whether you wanted to keep the Heart Foundation. Stake in Vale Innovations. Lila smiled faintly. I don't care. You're owed something. I already have it. He nodded. Then she said, he'll find a way to spin it. He always does. Let him, Julian replied. The world isn't listening to him anymore. Lila stepped forward slightly, toes at the cliff's edge. The wind whipped stronger now, tugging at her dress like it wanted her to fly. Or fall. She didn't move. Julian's voice softened. Will you ever tell them? Ava? The full truth. Lila stared out at the sea. They don't need it. He raised an eyebrow. And you? I lived it, she said. That's enough. Behind them, the news shifted to another story. Another scandal. Another man with a legacy turning to ash. But out here, above the sea and away from noise, Lila Vale stood barefoot on her own land, no mask, no name not hers, no fear. And then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled.